Hello crew, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a panoramic landscape photograph. Now, many of you probably have this overwhelmingly need or wish to buy an ultra wide landscape lens, or ultra wide lens rather, for landscape photography. And of course, an overwhelmingly wish list to also buy all the accessories that one would think is required to start doing landscape photography. But truth be told, there are a lot of hacks to get around this. And the one that I want to discuss with you today is creating a panorama landscape shot using the lens and camera that you currently have, which more than likely is more than adequate to create a quote unquote ultra wide or wide field of view for creating a shot like that. All right. So back in the day, let me just give you a little bit of history. When the film days were still around, and I actually want to put a little asterisk there because film is becoming ever more popular again. But in the film days, yeah, they actually had actual cameras that would capture panoramic shots. And it was a Hasselblad X-Pan, and some of you may have heard that camera before, but if you haven't, I think this is a hyperlink that you can click on and to get a preview of what that is about. But in today's modern techniques, you don't necessarily have to buy a panoramic camera in order for you to shoot a panoramic shot. Why consider panoramic shots? Well, there are two main reasons that do come in mind, and the obvious reason is to capture a wider or expansive field of view. Most of you who are just probably getting into photography have what we call a kit lens. And a kit lens is, basically, well, I guess it just comes in all flavors and sizes, but typically it's a zoom lens that lacks a zoom range that goes beyond the 35 millimeter. So you pretty much have a normal zoom is what we call it. So it most likely is like a 24 to 70 or a 55 to 200 type of lens. So you're lacking that ability to capture a wide field of view. And the other reason for considering panoramic technique for capturing a wider field of view is this idea that your camera is well, if you've bought a recent camera, most likely you have more than adequate resolution to create larger prints. But in the event that you do have a consumer grade camera, the resolution on that is probably lacking. You're probably anywhere between the 12 to 18 megapixel range. And so when you start to consider large prints, more often than not, if you're only doing a single shot, the print or resolution isn't adequate enough. Now, of course, this is a very subjective topic because we have to take into consideration the distance in which this image is being viewed. But basically, more resolution allows or yields better quality images for the simple fact that there's more pixels that are attributing to this, I guess, quote unquote, sharper kind of a vibe, right? If you have a higher resolution camera, it has a tendency of feeling sharper because there's just a lot more detail that is viewable in the image. So these are the two main reasons why I would suggest considering panoramic. One is a wider field of view, and the other one is this idea of compounding the resolution of your current camera. All right, I want you guys to practice this technique before venturing out to a grandiose location. And it's as simple as going to anywhere that has basically a good range in terms of depth. So, you can go to a park, or you can go to, quite frankly, anywhere. So here are the steps to get you started for panorama landscape shots. You want to start off by setting your camera to manual mode. And the reason for this is because you want to have a consistent exposure. Mind you, I do not indicate any exposure recipes per se to capture a landscape photo, because that is subjective. It's always dependent on the type of shot that you're going for, the type of, dynamic range in terms of tones that are available in your shots. You all want to take all that into consideration. But more importantly is consideration to the depth of field, the amount of sharpness that you want to allow for your image, okay? And one of the apps that we use to calculate the appropriate depth of field for your scene is a PhotoPills app. I do highly encourage you to download it. It is a very much resourceful tool, helpful tool to help you navigate various types of landscape photographs. For example, one is to calculate depth of field, like how much you want to be in focus relative to your distance to your foreground, middle ground, and the background. There's ways to find out where the sun path is going, calculations for star trails, getting a preview of the night sky in terms of where is the Milky Way located and where is that path. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that really delve into all the features that PhotoPills app will help you plan your trip to whatever destination you want to go to. Here, I'm just pointing the simple fact that it has a depth of field calculation, and basically you just plop in the camera you're using, what kind of lens you're using, and then it'll basically tell you what your hyperfocal distance is in relation to what your aperture and distance from your camera to the farthest thing in your scene. And so very super helpful. Now, after that, after you've determined sort of your depth of field, your aperture settings and whatnot, the one additional thing that I want to point out prior to you actually clicking your shutter button is choosing the appropriate focus points in your camera. Some of you, or if not most of you, are more than likely just using the general autofocus, where you're allowing your camera to pick whatever it is in front of your camera to focus on. But when you're doing panoramic shots and when you're considering what you want to be sharp in your scene, you definitely want to switch to an autofocus method that is a single point, meaning that you can actually change from a generalized area to just one single point. So in other words, when you're looking in your viewfinder, you'll only see one little tiny box that hovers over the area that you want to be primarily in focus. And of course, your depth of field will matter in that sense, because that's kind of what you're telling your camera, hey, this is the point in which I need to be absolute in focus. And then depending on what your aperture is, you'll start to see a fall off in terms of what is and isn't sharp in your scene. The next thing you want to do in terms of creating a panoramic shot is step 5. You want to ask yourself, do you want to just do a classic panoramic shot? And what that means is you're most likely only just doing 3 to 4 images that pan from left to right. So you're only getting this kind of horizontal field of view. Whereas if you decide to do more than the 3 to 4 shots and you go with the 6 to 9 shots, then you're considering what I call an expansive panoramic shot, because not only are you panning from left to right, but you're also panning left to right and top to bottom. So you're capturing these additional images to cover the sky, and as well as your foreground area or the ground area of your scene. Okay, so in the following video, you'll see that I'm doing an expansive panoramic shot where I'm actually doing more than a classic panoramic shot of 6 shots. And typically I'm doing like 9 to 12 shots. Okay. And then on a last note that you want to be mindful about is that when you are doing these sequence shots, you want each of these shots to overlap each other by at least 30 to 50%. There isn't really a right or wrong way. I like to basically get better coverage, so I really overlap my images. And so as you're watching this next video, you're probably going to think that I'm overlapping too much, but I think if you do that, the outcome for the algorithm to stitch your images together yields a better result for that reason. All right. So here is a sample practice that I did for an expansive panoramic shot. Again, what I mean by expansive is it means that I'm doing more than 3 images or 4 images. And I'm not just panning left to right. I'm also doing coverage left to right and top to bottom. And this is what I mean by that. So here I've basically laid out the shots. I'm covering the sky, taking 3 shots from left to right. I'm covering my horizon line from left to right, and I'm covering my foreground or the immediate ground coverage, so to speak, to cover that area. So here I'm using 9 images. You'll hear mixed opinions about whether or not you should be using tripod, but you can opt for that. But I'm finding that software that stitches images together are just so darn good that you can pretty much handhold your shots. But the only way for you to really conclude whether or not that is ideal method is to practice. Okay, so for the sake of this argument, this particular pano shot that I did handhold, and as a matter of fact, I actually shot it from inside my vehicle just to test how well Adobe Lightroom can stitch the images together. Moreover, what else was I going to say? Oh, a complex shot, mind you. If it was a slightly windy day, so I'm taking considerations of whether or not it would stitch trees good or these weeds that are here on my foreground area. Like, there's slight movement going on there. So I'm, kind of at first skeptical as to whether or not they would stitch it appropriately. And you'll find that it does an amazing job of stitching the images together. All right, here is the outcome of that series of shots taken. I combined 9 images in Lightroom. And to simulate that you don't necessarily need a wide-angle lens, I wanted to pretend that the only lens that I had was a 50 millimeter. So I shot the image with that perspective, the 50 mil, because I think a lot of beginner photographers are picking up the quote-unquote nifty 50, because it's a very inexpensive lens that you can pick up, a prime lens. And so I simulated that, and by combining 9 images at that focal length, I'm able to get this expansive field of view, expansive panorama shot, and I'm just blown away at how well Adobe Lightroom was able to stitch that together. All right, and then here's another image that that I practiced. I just went down Garden Highway, which is an area here in Sacramento. And I thought this was an interesting perspective. I got some leading lines, and it's obviously cool to shoot bridges, and so I figured I'd practice on that. So I got a great horizon line that I can follow, that I can use my focus point to be very consistent in that general area. Okay, in this shot I simulated a 35 millimeter. So I used 35 millimeter and I captured about 12 images that I stitched together, and this is that view. All right, you get a wider field of view. And here's that same image. Like if the only lens that I had was a 35 millimeter, this is that field of view. So as you can see right away, it's very much a different shot by allowing yourself a wider field of view. Okay, so here's that shot, and then here's the panoramic shot. All right, and then the next thing in this video, I just want to show you really quick how easy it is to even merge these images in Adobe Lightroom. All right, to create your panorama, you want to import your images. Okay, I use Lightroom Classic as my raw editor, as well as way of organizing my images. And so if you are not a Lightroom user, this may be a slight challenge, just getting used to the layout of the software itself. But for the most part, if you are a Camera Raw user, there is a lot of crossover and similarities for the ways in which you would stitch these images together. Okay, and it's as easy as basically finding the images that you shot in sequence for the panoramic shot. So, and all you need to do, if you're a Lightroom user, you can either be in the library module or the develop module, and highlight or select all of those images that you are going to stitch together. I hit Control right click. Actually, I wonder if you can just hit right click. Yeah, so you actually have to hit the Control key. I'm not quite sure what that translates to in PC world, but I'm on a Mac. So when I hit Control and right click on my mouse, it opens up this dialog box where you will find a photo merge menu option, and then just simply click Panorama. Okay, if you were bracketing your shots, I'm not going to introduce it in this video. But if you were bracketing your shots in hopes of getting more of a dynamic HDR-ish type of shot, then you would select HDR Panorama. But since we did not do that, and this is a somewhat intro class to landscape, you just want to keep it simple. Click on Panorama, and Lightroom will do its magic, stitching all those sequence shots for you. And voila. Okay, and so I'm not going to define what these three options mean: spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. All that really matters is that you can actually click on these, and it'll give you a preview of what that looks like. So, which is a great thing, because you don't have to necessarily process it and in order to find out what that looks like. You can actually just click on it, and it'll show you the various interpretations of the panoramic shot that it's going to spit out for you. So I'm finding that I'm liking the cylindrical for this shot. I mean, I've seen videos on YouTube, and you may have as well, that spherical is kind of a nicer feel to the shot itself. But again, it's all subjective. Everything is so subjective. So click one that vibes with you. Fill edges could kind of get a little bit messy if it's not sampling correctly. And so to avoid all that, I just end up clicking the auto crop. So it'll crop all the outer edges, because this is what happens if you don't have that clicked. So basically, if you hit auto crop, it'll just crop all the other areas that don't make sense, or at least it's not calculating properly. So, and once you've done that, you hit the merge button, and when you do that, it'll spit out your outcome in the film strip following those sequence of images. And here is that outcome. And as you can see, right, my beginning talking point was reason number 2 as to why you would consider panoramic shots is that you can compound the resolution of your camera, because you're doing multiple shots, creating basically a single shot. So when you do that, you can see here it's bloated my image on its longest edge, 15,091 pixels. So you can make a huge print with this, okay? So, and this is how simple it is to create a panoramic shot using Adobe Lightroom. And once it's done that, you can manipulate your image as usual, you know, bringing back some highlight detail, opening up your shadow detail, maybe adding some clarity and texture to give it a little bit of grit and sharpness. You can boost your vibrance and saturation, however you want to edit your photo. But you should not edit your photos prior to doing the stitch. I recommend doing your stitch first and then editing accordingly. And that is all. That's how easy it is to create a panoramic shot using Adobe Lightroom.